Greeting brothers and sisters. In today's video, we will be talking about Jordan B. Peterson as he visited our city recently and held a talk here. Now, before the event, I didn't know too much about him. All I knew is that he's a clinical psychologist who also holds talks and is famous for certain controversial topics like feminism and also inclines towards certain Christian thoughts and Christian ideologies. Now, in today's video, I will be sharing what impact and influence Jordan B. Peterson had on my life while I saw him speak live. The first thing that surprised me was the stadium was full of people, especially young people, people from all sorts of backgrounds, and I didn't know what he is going to talk about, but definitely I knew that he's not going to give a sermon. So I went there without any expectations, but boy, when he started to speak, he started to explain the biblical stories from the beginning, starting from Cain and Abel, and then he talked about the flood, and then he talked about Abraham, and then he talked about David, and then he talked about Jonah, and then he talked about Job, and then he was talking about Jesus and the cross. He explained the whole Bible narrative in his speech, and I was so surprised that a person of his stature and the person of his place is going to talk about biblical stories so convincingly and sharing point of views which I never expected and which I never heard before, and explaining to a crowd that was not necessarily Christian. I mean, why was he doing that? And what comes to my mind is that while he was explaining the stories, he was explaining the story of Jonah, for example, and he said God had given Jonah a message to go and share that message, but Jonah didn't want to share that message because it was a difficult thing. It was a tough thing for him to do, but because he didn't share that message and he was going in a different direction, he had to face many more difficulties, and then he eventually went and shared that message. And when he did go and share that message, people listened and people converted and people had a change of heart. And as he was speaking, I could sense and I could feel the spirit in this man. And as though he was saying that I am speaking like Jonah because God has given me a message to share to the people, and I don't know. I mean, it is tough for him. I believe it is tough for him to do it. But I was, to be honest, very impressed by this man because God had given him a message to share, and he shared it courageously, and he shared it unapologetically, and he shared it without any hesitations. And that message had a great impact on my life. And then I started to read his book, 12 Rules of Life. And as I read the book, I came across the first chapter, the chapter about a funny story of lobsters. It's not really a story, it's a fact, it's a truth on how lobsters live. The interesting fact about the lobsters that Jordan was mentioning is that they will have to fight for the same region of seabed for food, shelter, mates and other things. And if two lobsters want the same area or the same region, they will have to battle against each other. And he mentioned that the battle is in four stages. In the first stage, if the two lobsters are coming against each other, one of them senses that he is weak, he will just leave. But if they are still fighting by the fourth stage, now this stage is very, very dangerous and very serious because one of the lobsters will be seriously wounded, and the wounded lobster or the lobster that has lost will be completely living a different life. His brain, in fact, will be rewired. His brain will be rewired for survival. His brain will be rewired for living a life on bits and pieces and on scraps, rather than the lobster that has won, whose life will be much more easier. He will get food much more easily. He will get mates much more easily. But the wounded lobster or the lost lobster, he will be so much wounded that now against he will not have the courage or the guts to fight again. In fact, even if he fights against lobsters against whom he has won in the past, his chances of winning are much lower, and he will most likely lose. In fact, not only will his brain be rewired, his hormonal structure or his hormones will be also different, and he will secrete much less serotonin. Thus, he will not stand straight, will be living completely differently. And Jordan was comparing this sort of effect and this sort of a brain activity to human beings as well. Human beings, when they are in this state of stress, when they are losing one battle against the other battle of life, of circumstances, of family, of finances, of so many other things, their chances of winning again become less and less and less. Brothers and sisters, as I was reading this chapter and as I was going through this, it dawned on me, and it revealed something about my own life, that I have been losing and losing and losing in the past as well. In the COVID time, we had lost because the restaurants were closed. Of course, I'm a chef restaurateur. But the biggest blow that we had in the past 2 years is losing our son, our 9-month-old son. In fact, when we lost our son, both my wife and myself, our hearts were paining and aching so much that it had a physical effect on our posture, on our body. Till today, I am not able to raise my arm completely because there is some sort of a lump, and the same thing is that my wife's shoulder are also inside and drooping inside. And Jordan was mentioning also that the life situation where, there is the principle, and he called it the Matthew principle, which is taken from Matthew chapter 25 verse 29, where it says that those that have it more will be given to them, but those that do not have, also the less that they have, that also will be taken away from them. And this principle might seem like very, very harsh. In fact, I loved the sentence that Jordan said in his book, that you are the Son of God when your dicta applies to the crustaceans as well. And he mentioned that he was giving different examples of the Pareto principles and some other principles in which only a certain people have the most success. If you will look at the finances, few people have more money than the rest of the world. If you will look at this in so many other regions as well, the top few people sell the most books. The top few, he was giving an example of the classical music. For example, there are only 4 classical composers that most of the people listen to, and most of it is known. And one of them, he was mentioning Bach's work, even only a small percentage of his work is known. So the very few composers and very few music of those composers is well known, is very famous. And as I was reading that, he was encouraging. In fact, in the end of his book, he also mentioned what kind of a difficulty and pain he had to go through with his own children, and how he has gone through suffering and hurt, and he is still doing the work that God has told him to do. I would say he is a courageous man. He is an honorable man, because in the face of controversy, in the face of so much opposition, he continues to do what he is called to do. And in similar way, God has called me to do certain things as well, like making these videos, and this is a difficult things as well. Coincidentally, Jordan also became more well known through YouTube. So hats off, I don't wear a hat, but hats off to my new hero, who has the courage to do what God has called him to do, and is encouraging me, because I was double-minded. I was also thinking whether I should make Christian content or not, but after seeing him speak, saying that he is on a stage where it is difficult to speak on Christian topics, and he's not really in the field. He's not a pastor, he's not an evangelist, but he is sharing and doing what God has called him to do, and sharing the Christian message, and encouraged me as well. Is encouraging me that even though I have faced several losses in the past several years in the form of material things and businesses, but the most devastating of them all is the life of my firstborn and only son. And yet, even today, we face losses in the form of operating a business in an economically harsh environment of high inflation and high energy prices. And I also face the ill health of both my parents, which takes a mental, spiritual, and emotional toll on me. But we will recognize these patterns of losses and we will not allow the dormant brain of the lobster to be developed in us, who, after he has lost a fight, does not have the mental capacity to fight and win again. We will learn from Jordan's first rule in his book, which is stand up straight with your shoulders back. We will not hunch in. We will not give up. We will learn from our new mentor. We will learn from our new hero, who also faces controversy, who also faces adversity, but continues to do what God has called him to do. And I believe deep down in my heart that God has called me to share his messages through these videos, and I will continue to do it in the face of adversity and difficulties. And this is where, when we continue to struggle, when we continue to strive, no matter what difficulties we face, that is the time when we start winning. And when you start winning, then you win more and you gain more. This is where the Matthew principle applies, which says that if you have, more will be given to you, but if you don't have, that very little that you have will also be taken away from you. And this is the reason that only a minority of people in this world are extremely successful and majority of the people are just surviving. God has called us to live a victorious life. Thus we will recognize the mission that God has given us when we will continue to do that. In the face of adversity, in the face of trials and tribulation, and we will be successful. We will learn from the life of a humble lobster. We will learn from our new mentor, from our new hero, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson. God bless you, and I will see you in the next video.